Welcome everyone. This is Padma Menon from Moving Archetypes. In this video, we are going to explore deep time, the archetype of primordiality, and the relationship to what we consider to be the history repeats itself idea of time. We're going to meet this wonderful deity of the waters because it's the waters that hold this intelligence and the teaching of deep time, and the deity of the waters, Varuna, very ancient deity, and his generous gift of how we can live in our everyday life of institutions and systems and communities in alignment with this primordial or deep time movement, in harmony with nature within and without. But before I proceed, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share your comments. And if you like this video, please share it with others who may also enjoy this reflection. Many ancient traditions have this invocation of primordiality or ancientness. I think in the modern times, it is reflected in how many traditions focus on ancestry, which is of course still a look into the deep time of our own familial histories and acknowledging that we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us, that everything didn't begin with us and that we didn't create everything. So there is that humility and honoring of what has gone before. But my sense is that these traditions come from an older intelligence, which was about invoking primordiality or ancientness, which is beyond just our own lineages and family or ancestry of kin or community, but it goes back to the ancestry of the cosmos and of Earth itself. In the Indian tradition, some of the oldest deities were invoked as the elder, Jyeshta, which was also that sense of ancientness, what has been before, what has come before us. And these deities very often stand for a sense of something that is the source of the beginning and the ending, something where everything begins and everything ends. There's that emergence and dissolving space. And this is this sense of primordiality. And it is the waters, the archetype of the waters, that really holds this teaching of primordiality. And there is a reason why the waters materially are the closest expression of that fullness of consciousness. Of course, everything is consciousness, but the waters offers us right within our own bodies and around us this expression of the nature of consciousness. Just consider the water when we think about it as creatures of the land. We are, of course, living beings that live on land. So the waters is a completely different reality. We can't go into the waters with the same bodily ways of being, even the same physics of the body. We can't. The waters require a completely other way of being and moving the body. For example, swimming. It is a very different movement of the body. It has completely different physics, completely different ways in which our bodies are oriented towards the world around it. And the amazing thing about this is that it is very much at the body level. We can't just have a theory or an analysis of swimming in the encounter with water. We must, in fact, swim. We have to put our bodies in the water and have this very different movement language, this different way of being in the water, which is completely other than being on land. So nothing of what we know about being on land in our body serves us in the waters, because it is a completely other way, and we are much better off relinquishing that and really going into the waters prepared for an entirely other and different experience. So this is the nature of consciousness itself, and I mean the wholeness of consciousness, of which the land is a part of it. So our knowing, our knowledge, our things that we know and things that we have defined and categorized is only a very, very small part. In fact, in philosophy, it is said that it is about a quarter of the fullness of consciousness. So when we go to that fullness of consciousness, the waters, and of course, if we look at the waters, the greater part of earth is made up of the waters, the greater part of our body is made up of the waters. There's this beautiful congruence with everything, with the archetypal world of consciousness as well as the material world. There is an absolute alignment in consciousness. One, it's not that the archetypes are a metaphor or even that they are symbolic, but they are actually, there is a very one-to-one congruence between an archetypal invocation and the material expression. So you've got this water, which is the greater part of the land in which we live and the bodies in which we live. And in order to encounter this greater part, both of ourselves and of consciousness, which again is the same thing, we require the relinquishing of what we know and the acceptance that this is a different material reality which requires us to be able to move and be and breathe. There is a collaborative relationship with water. Water molds us and shapes us and influences our movement. And so there is this wonderful and beautiful collaboration between the body and water. In fact, the ancient archetypal dancers called apsaras, and the word apsara means beings that flow in water. So archetypal dance is like swimming. It is an intelligence and a language of the waters. Well, it's more than swimming, because it is not just a way of how can we just move and survive in waters, but it is also holds the teaching and the intelligence of the waters. So the waters holds that primordial teaching, the teaching of primordiality is held in the waters. Recently, I had this wonderful experience of going on what I called a pilgrimage with a friend of mine around the city I live in. I live in Canberra in Australia, and just around where I live, we went to what are called the geological deep time sites. Of course, everywhere on Earth, we stand on a deep time site because the Earth itself is very, very old, very ancient. The Earth is 450 million years old, apparently, around where I live, and sometimes, of course, older than that, because we're looking at the soil that is available for us to actually study and date. But of course, we know that the Earth is billions of years old. So wherever we stand on this primordial ancientness that goes way back into deep time. So as I was walking around these sites, we were looking at these slices of rock where there are these layers upon layers, each layer pointing to a set of circumstances that were in Earth at the time, and sometimes the bones or the fossils of some of those life forms that existed in those circumstances. And when you look at this slice, you can see these layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, millions, hundreds of millions of stories about the Earth's past in this one slice of rock. It is completely overwhelming and awesome. That sense of awe, the sense of sacredness, the sense of the magnitude and the magnificence of time itself. It's materially experienced when I ran my hand over these rocks that were 450 million years old, or one particular rock which was actually 5.5 billion years old. And just running the hand, it was for me more sacred than being in a temple or a place of worship, because this was that sense of infinity and immortality materially there for me to actually lay my hand on. It was such an incredible honor. And there it was, these sites scattered around in the most ordinary of ways. There was no pomp and ceremony. They were simply scattered around all over the place. People were walking past it, sometimes not even recognizing that they are walking past something which is inviting them to consider this primordiality and this ancientness. And what came to me as I was in this encounter, in this pilgrimage, is this sense of primordiality. When we connected back to water, to earth, to nature, it is not an abstract concept. It is something that is available materially. And truly, for us as people who live in material bodies, it is that direct material experience that makes a certain mark within us. It moves us, it shifts us, it changes our being, it changes our consciousness, and brings a certain insight, a revelation, which is completely an experiential revelation. This revelation about the experience of deep time. We all hear this word deep time, but what does it actually mean as an experience when it really touches you within and you have this, it's like this lightning that just strikes you, looking at this rock face and seeing the story of hundreds of millions of years just right there in front of you, the livingness of the rock, the sentience of the rock, and how sentience is infused materially in every single matter around us, in our bodies, of course, but also in the soil, in the rocks, that these rocks are living beings, that they collect these stories and then they present it generously to us for us to encounter this incredible deep time in this present moment. And what I saw is this movement, and we'll come to why I'm speaking about movement in a minute. There was this movement of these layers. So it was time as a movement, as these waves of time, as this movement, like the water. There was something very oceanic, even in the patterns of these rocks. And you saw how these time periods were so different from each other. The circumstances, those realities were very different. So it is not that time repeated itself. We think of time as cyclical, and at a certain level, that is right, because there are these cycles of cataclysmic events which bring something to an end, which creates a radical transformation, and then something emerges from there, and then there might be another cataclysmic event, whether it is from within the earth, like an eruption, a volcanic eruption, or an earthquake, or a big flood, or it could be something like a meteorite striking earth. But usually there are these cataclysmic events, which is what these rocks record, because it is often the cataclysmic events that create this impact, which is recorded by these rocks, this history of cataclysms and emergence. But the thing is that it is not that life just repeats itself. Most of the time, when there is a cataclysmic event, what emerges is very often a very different kind of reality, a different set of material circumstances, which then supports a very different kinds of life forms. So it is not right to say that time repeats itself. In fact, there is a death, there is an ending, and there is an emergence of something that is radically different. What I found out during this pilgrimage is where I live now, most of the city was at one time situated somewhere near the equator, and it was a shallow tropical sea with some volcanic mountains. And in fact, the mountain near my house could well have been a volcanic mountain at one time. So it looked completely different. There was a completely different life form here. This was underwater. And yet now here we are. It is a very different reality. It is not a repetition of what went before. So this sense that time is cyclical only in sense of this pattern of ending and emergence is this teaching of the waters, which is held by the deity of the waters, who is called Varuna. Varuna is an ancient deity. In fact, he has an ancestry which is not just Indian. His ancestry goes beyond India. And Varuna is the lord of order, or Rita. Now, Rita, which is also sometimes used to denote truth, because order, truth is all the same thing. It is not actually the kind of order and truth that we think in our mind-led ways, which is about a definition, about an ideology, a philosophy, or certain rules and regulations which we consider the truth. But here in this archetypal realm, this order and truth pertains to the primordial movement of beginnings and endings. So for example, one of the hymns to Varuna speaks about the movement of Varuna, the teaching or the wisdom of Varuna as the waft and weft. So this comes from the world of weaving, about the looms, and the waft in the loom is this movement lengthwise. So if you have ever seen the hand looms, especially the traditional looms in India, you will see this waft, which is this movement this way. And the weft is the sideways movement. And so in a loom, you have this combination of this movement lengthwise and the spreading sideways movement. Both combine together. So in Varuna, the movement is, there is an ebb, there is a flow and an ebb as the waves come in and out, but there is also the spreading of the sea. So it is not a narrow channel that's going in a straight line, but there is this spreading coming forward and this sideways spreading. So it is a multi-dimensional movement, which of course is very difficult for us to put into words, because you can see I have to say the waft and the weft. They are two separate things. But when we bring it into a dance movement, especially the movement of the hips, then you combine the movement of the hips in this movement of ebb and flow. And you have this multi-dimensional movement. That is the movement of Rita. So Rita is a movement that is multi-dimensional, that comes into being but also dies. Now, the other thing that is associated with Varuna is death. There is an ending. There must be an ending for an emergence. Sometimes when we use words like rebirth or reincarnation, we stay in this realm of time repeats itself, because we think we are incarnating something of the same thing again, or we are birthing again something that is the same thing. But the Varunas in Rita, that it is like this cataclysmic event. So there's the macrocosmic movement of deep time in terms of cataclysms and re-emergences. And in our lives, there is the life and death, but there is the in-breath and the out-breath. So there is this multi-layered way in which we are invited to break what is called the loop of time. So Varuna holds a noose in his hands, and this noose is called, in Sanskrit it's called pasha, and pasha also means like a snare, something that traps us, something that stops us. We get captured by it, we get grabbed by it, just like a noose. And this noose is like a time loop, because this sense we have that time repeats or history repeats, or that we are just simply redoing something that has already happened, that is this loop, the snare, in which we are trapped. And therefore, if we subscribe to this, or if we live in this way that the mind has about staying with the known, about staying with what it already has defined and understood, and never letting go. The dying is that invitation to let go. And yes, in our intimate worlds, that is like a mini cataclysm for us. For us to let go of something that we know is terrifying, just like the cataclysm is at a macrocosmic level. But that is the only way that something new, something other, something radically different can birth, is when we can let go. Now the thing is that whether we acknowledge it or not, these patterns will happen. Whether we acknowledge that there is a mini cataclysm happened in our life, now we can completely avoid it, we can ignore it, and we can go on as if nothing has changed. We can do that at the level of the earth, which most of the time we are doing. But the thing is that what is primordial, it is not really dependent on us. That is this deep time, that it will happen. And when we look at these, when we attend to the material manifestations of deep time, like these, the rocks that hold the story, we can see that hundreds of millions of years, this pattern, this movement, this rhythm has been unfolding. And the truth is this unfolding movement of primordiality, this movement of the waft and the weft. And it doesn't matter whether we think that it's happening or not, whether it's in our intimate lives, whether it is in the society around us, or whether it's on the planetary level or the cosmic level, it happens anyway. And there is only the invitation for us to encounter that primordiality. That is what these traditions so generously provided, is these archetypal deities which invited us to attend to this primordial rhythm that is there so generously in the movement of the ocean, the teaching of the waters, in the waters within us, in the nature around us. So it is not something that we need great skill and expertise. It is not something that somebody special has it in their hands and we have to suffer and beg and plead to actually receive this teaching. But it is there in our own bodies, in the nature around us and in the rocks around us. And that is this generosity of this deity Varuna, is that it is accessible to anybody if we can turn towards that wisdom of the waters within us, in terms of our consciousness, in terms of our bodies, and also the nature around us. The other really wonderful thing about Varuna as an archetypal deity is that he is one of those deities that really makes it allows us to bring this teaching into our ordinary lives. So there are some deities that can be very forbidding. They can seem very elemental and wild. For example, a deity like Rudra, who is fierce and wild, and the storm deity. And often we can be completely terrified and wonder, how can we bring these kind of energies and teachings into our everyday lives? Varuna and many of the deities that are associated with Varuna are those deities that are usually statesmen, teachers, philosophers, leaders, and they allow us to to access how this teaching, how this way of being, how Rita can become part of our systems and institutions, whether it's families or communities or states or however we organize ourselves. So Varuna is a blue deity, and the blue is an important attribute, because the blue denotes the dark water. So it's like the blue of the dark skies, the blue of the night skies, the blue of the waters. The waters and the sky are almost like they're mirrors of each other, as above, so below. The sky mirrors the waters, the oceans, and the ocean mirrors the sky. So there is in this invocation, the sky is often considered to be the waters of the sky. So Varuna is that connection with the waters, and the waters are about this, the maternal aspect, that aspect which is nurturing and caring and harmonious, the great mothers. So Varuna is the child of the waters, and the waters is the great mother Apa. So just as when we give birth, the baby comes out covered with the mother's waters, so also you have these deities that with their blueness, they connect us back to the tenderness and the nurturing and the spreading, the vastness, the generosity of the waters. And what they suggest is that it is possible to bring this Rita, this flow, this primordial flow into the world. And Varuna's blueness is then, you can see that there are a lot of blue deities, like for example Rama, who's the archetypal king, Krishna, the archetypal philosopher, mentor, teacher. So, and Vishnu, another blue deity who is the maintainer of all material creation, whatever that is come into form. And all of these deities point to to this invitation, to the possibility, to this gift, to the teaching that it is not only possible, but that it is to be harmonious with that primordial Rita in the ways in which we organize ourselves, is the way that we can live as participating in nature. So Varuna is considered to be the lawgiver, the archetypal deity of justice. But here we are speaking about justice, about law, about order as the primordial flow, this flow of the waft and the weft. From where that teaching comes, how can we be in alignment with this multidimensional reality that has this primordial ancientness, this deep time movement of ending and new beginnings, radically new beginnings, not a repetition. And how can we live in our everyday lives? How do we organize ourselves in systems, in institutions, in communities that are aligned with this primordial flow and aligned with what the deep time, what ancientness can teach us? Of course, if we consider the systems that we live by now, which are based on a hierarchical positioning of us as humans as being above and more clever and more progressive and therefore more worthy of being here, that is completely already not aligned with the primordial flow of Rita. In Rita, which is multidimensional, there is no hierarchy, there is no linearity. All life, the life of the rock, the life of every single animal, insect, plant is of equal value. It is not that nature exists in service of one life form which is crowned itself better than everybody else. So you can see how the minute we subscribe to hierarchy, we are then already disconnected from that truth of Rita. So in the hymn to Varuna, we say that the noose is what is going to trap liars. And who are the liars? Well, in Varuna's world, the liars are those who do not recognize Rita, who don't follow Rita, who are not willing to contend with the reality of Rita. So when we speak about, in some traditions, we speak about reality as an illusion, and sometimes we assume that is a kind of matter or material negating philosophy. In my view, that actually pertains to what we have narrated as reality. And if that narrative is based on principles which are not aligned with Rita, for example, the principle of hierarchy, then that is an illusion. It's not that reality is an illusion, but our narrative of reality is an illusion when it is based on things that have nothing to do with the truth about reality, that primordial ancestry of reality, the teaching of deep time, which is about these completely non-linear, multidimensional movements which have endings, depth, and beginnings. And what this provides us, if we can get over our fear of ending, if we can get over our fear of not being at the top of everything, not dominating, not controlling, what it provides us is this wonderful beauty of that we are taken care of. And that is the mother waters. So again, in one of the hymns, it is said that the mother waters long for her children. And we, like Varuna, we are children of the waters. And the mother longs for us. The mother is not wishing us harm or punishing us, but she longs for us to turn towards her teaching. She's willing to teach, she's willing to share, she's willing to nurture us, provided we can contend with, we can move with the waters of reality, this flow and movement, the waft and weft of reality. And then, as I felt when I was standing in front of these rocks that held this teaching of deep time, there was this sense of infinite tenderness, of being protected, of a sentience that is taking care of things. And I cannot put a cause effect on it because I can't say why I felt it, because that's not really the nature of a multidimensional reality. Is not cause effect, it's not linear. But all I can say is that for me, that I sense that as the truth in my bones, that there is a sentience that takes care of everything, this movement of the cosmos, and that we are a part of that sentience, we are a part of the movement and not the controllers of that movement.